What's going on YouTube? Greg here. As you can see, we're starting on a pretty big project here. It is no engine in my Supra. So what exactly is going on here? Well, quite a few things. So my garage is a complete mess right now. I have the whole motor and trans pulled out, engine harness, everything is out right now. And the reason for that is because I am actually going to be repainting my bay. I'm going to be doing a minor shave and a minor tuck as well. So I pulled out the old engine harness because I'm putting in a new engine harness, which is going to be a lot cleaner than my old harness. I'm going to have more sensors that I didn't have before, and also I'm going to be running the IGN 1A smart coils to replace my GM LQ9 coils, and they're gonna look a lot nicer. This wiring harness is gonna be for all the sensors that I need, so I'm not gonna have any loose wires. I'm not gonna have to modify anything to make all my sensors work, so it's perfectly built for everything that I'm going to be running electronically. And that includes the BTI gauge that I ordered. And I bought all these parts a couple months ago, and due to COVID, there's just a huge backlog of orders. So it's just delaying everything right now. But it doesn't really matter because I have the engine out, and I haven't even gotten to the sanding and the painting and all that yet. So by the time I'm done with that, hopefully the electronics will be here. So the wiring, the BTI gauge, and then I have some more parts on order too. So I ordered so like I got a solid motor mounts that I'm going to be putting down here, and I'm thinking of just getting rid of my brake booster and using the one from Buck Performance, but I haven't decided if I'm going to eliminate power brakes. I may just keep the master cylinder. I might just keep the brake booster and use the master cylinder from a 97 to 98 because those have a little bit of a nicer tank. And since I'm getting rid of my ABS and my track pump and actuator and my relays for both of those systems, I really don't need all those extra ports on the master cylinder. So we're just trying to make this engine bay as clean as possible. Because I don't want to do this again. It's a ton of work, and I'm so lucky to be able to have the tools and the garage and a lift and all that to make this possible. Because if I didn't have a lift, I probably would not be doing this right now, because having a lift saves so much time, because you're able to lift the car, lower the car whenever you want, and that's really helpful for when you're trying to pull out like all the wiring harnesses, pulling out the motor, because we're taking the transmission out with the motor, and the transmission is like super long, so you have to angle the engine and the trans properly for you to pull it out. And you need a 2-ton hoist, because the 1-tons, the boom is not long enough and it doesn't go high enough. So if you don't have a 2-ton, there's probably little to no chance that you're getting one of those engines out, because this just extends out so far that the boom only goes up to like the front of the valve cover, and there's no chance that you're able to lift that engine without pulling it off and dragging the motor mounts on the subframe and then smashing an oil pan into the front of the rad support. That's a lot of disaster. So I actually had to sell my 1-ton and get a 2-ton. Drove all the way to New Jersey because that's the only store that had it. Got it back, put it together in like an hour, and then we hooked up the motor and we pulled that out pretty quickly. I unplugged the wiring harness, all the sensors, and pulled out like the headlights, the bumper, the radiator, and the fans, all before doing the engine, because you gotta clear everything out to make the room, and you don't want to be pulling hoses, lines, and wiring with your engine and end up damaging more stuff. So it's good to do a triple check on everything to make sure all your stuff's unplugged, like the power steering and the AC. Like you gotta take that off the block, Make sure you're not pulling that along with the block, and if you do want to leave all the lines connected for the AC so you don't have to redo the Freon. Then you have to take it off the block and put it to the side. It's going to make painting a little bit more tricky because I have the lines still in the firewall, but I think I'm just going to tape all that off and try to spray around it. I'm not doing like a super professional job here. I'm doing this all by myself, including the paint, so I'm sure a body shop would put in a lot more effort as far as taking those lines off, but I'm sure there's definitely ways to do it with them on there. Just takes a little bit more time. So there's a lot of unused holes that I'm going to be plugging either via Bondo for like some of the smaller holes, and then the bigger ones like this that go straight through, I'm probably going to have to weld those in, or if I want to avoid that, I might just buy like little rubber grommets plugs like that and then just plug these in. So it's not a huge deal because they're all the way in the back. And then the fuse box and all this wiring here that goes in the front of the car, that's the body wiring for like the lights, the relays, the fuse box, your these two relays. I'm not even sure what these are for. I think it's for the AC or the fan, I'm not sure, but all that has to come out, and it pulls out through the fender liners. So on both sides of the car, by your feet, there's going to be like fuse boxes that you have to unhook the plugs, and then you have to slide them through these yellow grommets, and the yellow grommets actually pop out. So when you pop that out, it'll make the wiring come out super easy because you're not getting all those harnesses and plugs out through that yellow plug as it sits right now. So once we pull out that wiring harness, we're gonna have a lot more room to paint and sand and do all that good stuff. I gotta take this intercooler off. I gotta take the hood prop off, the overflow tank, because I'm throwing that away because I'm getting a new overflow tank. And yeah, so all these dimples, we're gonna fill these in with body filler, sand them down flat so it looks a lot better. This, I'm only gonna keep maybe one of them. I might just cut the whole thing off, we'll see, because I'm not even mounting anything to this anymore. So the ABS, the track relays are gone. The siren horn is gone because I have an aftermarket one, and my boost controller I think is going to be mounted up here. ABS is gone, so I'm going to delete the 2 wire plugs that go to the ABS, and I think the only thing I'm going to have here is just the dual catch cans that I'm going to get from One Up Fabrication. And then in that corner, still undecided if I want to do brake booster delete or not. I might end up just keeping power brakes and using the 97-98 master cylinder, because this is a street car, and since I'm already deleting ABS, track, I want to keep it as dailyable as possible. I don't daily this car, but I want that feeling when I drive this car. That's why I'm keeping AC. That's why I'm keeping power steering. ABS and track, is not a huge deal because I don't drive this car in the rain or snow. And if I do drive the car, it's really just on the street. And track is very limited as well. So we'll see. And the worst part about the bay is actually under here. You can see it's black. It doesn't match the rest of the chassis, and it's rusty. And the reason for this, I think the previous owner actually, he said that the battery started leaking acid and it started stripping away the paint. So I'm not sure what happened here. He either just painted it black or he left it. I have no clue what happened, but this is the main reason why I'm going ahead with this project, because it's completely ugly and it's rusting and I don't want it to get any worse. So you can see there's some rust building up there. I don't want that to get worse, so I'm, screw it. Go ahead. It's COVID. I have so much more extra time now. Today I'm going to be painting the engine bay of the Supra. Filming the prep work for all this is a lot of work, and honestly, it doesn't seem that fun to film. So I'm going to leave it to you guys to look up how to prep engine bays, but we have the engine bay prepped. I've been spending about a week doing this so far, and you know, taking apart the whole car, obviously there's a lot to take off. You know, I had to remove the engine, I had to remove everything from the engine bay, well, almost everything. I still have the AC lines in here, so I didn't drain the Freon before I did all this. That was kind of dumb on my end. So, and you can't really just let it release to the atmosphere, because one of all, it's illegal. Second of all, that stuff is like super toxic and will screw up your respiratory system. So highly not recommended to do that. So I have to work around it. I still have the condenser, I still have the compressor, I still have the lines, but everything is taped off as best as I could do, and we're gonna try to paint around it. I also had to remove the whole suspension, the subframe, because I want to get, you know, underneath the frame rails, and also I don't want to get overspraying all over the suspension. And since I'm painting the fender wells, that stuff has to be removed. So a little extra work in the beginning, but you save so much time doing, like, you know, taping everything up. At that point, it's not even worth it. So just, you know, it's like 8 bolts, the subframe drops right off, and we already have everything off the car and it's on a lift, so why wouldn't we do that? So that's it. I'm getting ready to do the primer, and let me show you guys what I have. So I took several trips to Harbor Freight, did a lot of research, and even spoke to some guys at the Professional Auto Body retail store. So let me show you what I have to do this project. Obviously, to get to this level of the project, we had to clean everything several times, degrease, we had to sand. We're not going down to the bare metal on most of the areas because there's no really need to, but we did 320 grit on pretty much all the white pieces. So first, we're gonna start off with the epoxy primer. So I got this from a store called Albert Kemperly. They're based here in Westchester, New York. So here we have epoxy primer, white, made by PPG, super good stuff, and it comes with primer catalyst. So this is the activator, and you mix it 2-to-1 ratio with the primer, and then you also need to use, I think, the same, maybe half the amount of the catalyst of a reducer, and this is to thin it out so you can spray it through the gun nicely. As far as the gun goes, we have this Spectrum HVLP we got from Harbor Freight. It's about 130 bucks, and then you have to buy the regulator and the air water separator. That's like another 10 bucks or so. And this is like their upper level spray gun. I didn't really get the cheap $15 gun just because that seems too good to be true, and knowing Harbor Freight, their cheap stuff doesn't really last that long. So we went a little bit higher grade. We got the Spectrum one. They make another more expensive one called the Black Widow. That was like over $200, and I'm not painting like any panels on the outside, so I'm not too worried about that. But this is expensive paint, and I don't want to get a super cheap gun and have it come out bad. So that's the primer, and then we have body filler. This stuff is Duraglass. It's fiberglass reinforced body filler. They recommended this for engine bay because the engine bay does, you know, get hot. It also flexes, and this stuff holds up pretty well. So I'm using this to fill up some of these unused holes in the body where I removed, like, you know, the ABS, and like the OEM air filter has like some bolts that go in here. So I'm going to be filling in some holes and to smooth out the shock towers. So that comes after the epoxy primer. So you spray this on, you let it dry overnight, then you use the Duraglass and you fill in all your holes and body work that you need to do. Then you let that dry, and then you sand it down to smooth, and then you have to hit it again with the primer, this stuff, probably just like 1.5 coats, you know, a second lighter coat, and then you're gonna let that dry I think PPG says on their instructions you should let it dry for a minimum an hour, but I think I'm going to do it overnight just to be safe again. And then once you're done with the primer, let it dry overnight, and then you can use this red scuffing pad just to lightly scuff down the whole engine bay again. And then clean it with this wax and grease remover. You should use this every time you're doing in between coats, and especially before you do the primer. This gets rid of any crap that's stuck to your paint, whether it's some leftover oil or any moisture that might be in there. This will help get all that stuff out. And once you do that, then and your primer is all dry, then you're ready to hit it with your clear coat. And you should usually let about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour after your base coat to start applying your clear coat. And it comes with this hardener. I think it's also a 2-to-1 ratio, and you don't need a reducer for this because this stuff is already pretty thin. There's no color in here, so it should be pretty easy to spray. But yeah, this is the base coat. It's OEM Toyota White, and this is a 2-to-1 ratio with reducer. There's no activator for base coat. And of course, most importantly, you need a respirator for this job, unless you feel like getting cancer and ruining your respiratory system. You definitely need a good respirator. We have a 3M1 here. It's NIOSH approved. Alright, so we're in the engine bay, and we're going to go ahead. We're using the red pad. We're going to scuff the whole interior, and then we're going to wipe it down with that wax and grease remover, and then we're going to go ahead. We're going to make sure everything is dry, everything is super clean, and we're going to go ahead and start laying down our first coat of the epoxy primer. We just want to do the whole engine bay all over again in this scuff pad, and we want to try to make the paint as dull as possible. So look for anywhere that has some shine to it, and we're going to try to scuff that down so that it's nice and dull. So you can see the firewall looks really dull right now because I just finished doing the firewall. But if we go around, look here, you can still see some shine. So if you see that, you want to scuff it down with the red pad until you see no more shine. See? The shine is completely gone. So we're going to go ahead and get all the nooks and crannies. You want to make sure that you scuff the area really well, especially the area that's going to be super visible when you open the hood. Areas like the back here, you know, you're not really going to see it, but it's still important to scuff it down so that there's no more shine, because if you don't do that, the epoxy primer might not stick well, and that risks you might doing the job all over again. So let's do it right, do it the first time, and prep this really, really well. Super important. All right, guys, we are pretty much ready to prime. We have everything scuffed down really nicely. I went over it a few times, and I also used the wax and grease remover, and I went over the engine bay also a few times, and I also used compressed air to blow it every once in a while to make sure dust doesn't build up, and then also wipe it, so back and forth. And we have the paint mixed here. We have the PPG epoxy primer, the catalyst, and the reducer. So we've gotten the gun ready, and we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start spraying. So wish me luck. I actually started to film me doing the first 2 coats of the epoxy primer, but I started having some issues with the spray gun, and I decided to stop filming, and I forgot to start filming the actual spraying process. But I spent like a solid hour doing the spraying, but I think it came out pretty good. I did the whole bay, I did like the wheel wells all in epoxy primer, and then like the bottom here I'm going to be using Pour 15 because that's a better rust inhibitor. But the wheel wells, I did the epoxy primer on white, and then I'm going to top coat this with a gloss black. That's also rust preventative. So I did the primer just because the rust preventative is going to stick better to the surface. But the engine bay is white, so you can see. And some of the areas I have to sand down a little bit because I got some overspray. As you can see here, started to drip a little bit. And then I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna scuff this down with the red pad pretty much in all the areas that have some orange peel, and where I'm gonna do body filler. So this is fiberglass reinforced filler. We're going to use this to fill in some of the unused holes. So like this here, I'm going to fill in. This hole here, I'm going to fill in. It's mostly the holes that are bolts or don't go directly through to the other side. Like here, you can see my finger. That I'm not going to fill because you can't really fill a hole like that. You either have to weld it in, or you have to put like a metal wire behind it, and then you have to fill over it, because otherwise if you just do body filler, this is way too thin and it'll just poke right through, or if it flexes it'll just crack. But we're going to fill in something like that. We're going to fill in these holes on the side that are usually used for bolts, and then we're going to smooth out the shock towers, because here there's all these dimples. So we're going to put body filler here and then sand it down, and it will give us a nice smoother surface to work with. Wax and grease remover! So this is what I'm using for wax and grease remover. It's called Kimberly. It was 25 bucks for the whole gallon, and that's all they had, the only size, so I bought the whole gallon. But it's always good to have more than what you need, and you know, not have enough. So what I do, I just pour it into one of these little containers, and then I pour it onto my microfiber towel, and I just go around the whole engine bay, and then I wipe it down. Alright, so we wiped down the whole engine bay with wax and grease remover. Now I'm just going to give it a quick air down, just to help dry it and to get rid of any remaining dust that may have fell on here. So we're going to be putting in our body filler now to where we're filling in the holes. This stuff looks like gray cement. It really smells. It's probably not good to breathe it in at all. So make sure you're in a well ventilated area. I got a fan, I got 2 doors open, got my mask, I got my goggles, and I'm wearing gloves. So full protection, we're good to go. So once you crack this open, you have the hardener. You need the hardener to make sure this stuff dries and cures. Whatever you do, do not put the hardener directly into this can, because then the whole thing is going to harden up and you ruin the whole can. We need a mixing board. I just have this stainless steel board that I got from Harbor Freight. I cleaned it with the wax and grease remover so we're not getting any dust or oils into the filler. So this stuff I think cures pretty quickly, so you got to work pretty fast. You should only put the amount of body filler that you need at a time, and then seal it back up until you're ready to use more. I just have this mixing stick to use it kind of like a spoon, so I can pick up however much I need. They say you use about a golf ball size of hardener, golf ball size of body filler, and about a 1-inch line of hardener, and then you got to mix that on the board. You kind of want to overlap with each other, get it into a pile, and then flatten it out like this. And the purpose of this is to try to get rid of any air bubbles. So you basically want to mix it until it's all about the same color. Alright, so we've gone ahead and we did the Duraglass on the holes of the car. It's my first time using it, and I'm not sure if this is the correct way to do it, but this stuff is pretty gummy, and it's a little difficult to apply. So I'm going to do this in stages. I just put a bunch on here to fill in the holes. You know, obviously I still have a few more holes to go. I ran out of Duraglass on that one batch, so the next time I go in here, I'm gonna go ahead and fill in these other ones here. But what I'm doing here, I have this 220 grit sanding wheel, and I'm just going over and flattening out all the other holes that I filled in, and they're coming out pretty nice. So, you know, these are all filled in here, and this is really smooth now. These two are filled in, and they're really smooth. I don't feel any dimples. I don't feel the hole. It's rock solid now. So this is like, if I close my eyes, I feel it. I don't even know where the hole was. You know, it's just that smooth. It's nice. These are filled in. This one I haven't sanded yet. So I'm just gonna go around and do the wheel down all the extra Duraglass, and then tomorrow I'm gonna go in here and go at another round and fill in the holes that I missed. Guys, it's a new day. It's actually one of the nicest days of the week we've had. It's sunny out there. Pretty low humidity, and there's no expected chances of rain. It's been raining on and off for the past like 3 days. So luckily we have a garage. We're doing this all indoors, and it's pretty temperature controlled. It really doesn't get over like 80 in here. Sometimes a little bit hotter, but we open the door and it cools down. But yesterday I finished up with the shaving. I did the mini shave, so we filled in some of the holes that we're not using anymore. I didn't fill in all the holes because some of them, they're like the very shallow holes that just go through the body. I only filled in the ones that had, you know, some depth to it, that were used for actual bolts. So we filled in those holes, we let it dry, and then we sanded that all down. This area right here, I actually had to grind down to bare metal because the epoxy didn't stick well to it, and I think because that was the worst spot of the whole bay. But it's alright. We sanded that whole thing down, and now it looks really good. We put 2 coats on there, and then we did a top coat, final coat for the rest of the bay. Just to seal it off, because we did do some body work. So we have pretty much even paint all across the engine bay. I'm really happy with how it came out. You know, it's not 100% perfect with the body filling and all that. That stuff is pretty difficult to work with because it dries really quickly. It's a pain in the ass to mix, and most importantly, applying it to the hole, that's like the worst part because it just globs on. It's hard to get it to smooth out, and then that stuff dries quickly, like I said, so it starts to like turn into a gum, and then you can't use it anymore. And then like the mixing sticks, the mixing board, and then the spreaders, that stuff hardens up, and it's like a whole mess. I definitely don't like doing body filler. I'd rather not do it. So, but I'm pretty happy with the results. So like you could see some of the holes that I filled right here. You know, I filled those in. There's some holes up top here that I filled in as well. So I did miss a couple. I'm not gonna say I didn't do it. You know, it's, like I said, it's not perfect, but I'm happy with it. This is my first time doing it ever. And that's all we can really do, try my best. So we're taking advantage of this good day to finally lay down some colors. So we have our base coat from Metalux, and we also have some, I think it's called Pro Body clear coat, something like that. So we're gonna do, I'm gonna scuff this all down again lightly with that red pad, just to get any contamination that may have landed. Then we're gonna clean it with the wax and grease remover, and then we're gonna start setting up our base coat. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. There's no hardener. It's just 2 parts base and then 1 part reducer, so we can spray it. And then we're gonna do like 3 coats of that, see how it lays out. 3 coats of that with about like 8 minutes in between each coat, and then we're gonna let it dry, the final coat, for about 15 to 20 minutes. That'll give us enough time to prepare the clear coat. So we're gonna clean out the gun. Alright, so we're gonna sand down the engine bay, just using some red pad. We're gonna lightly scuff it, and then we'll be ready to shoot some base coat on it. So we're not going crazy. We're not going to apply like a ton of pressure. We're just lightly scuffing it to kind of smooth it out and get rid of any you know, dirt or bugs that may have stuck to it, or dust. So we want a really smooth surface for the base coat, but you don't want to take away the primer that's already here. I applied the base coat. We did 3 coats. My camera battery actually died again, so I couldn't film that part. But we let it dry for about 30 minutes, and we're gonna go ahead and put the clear coat on. We're just gonna blow it off with some air before we do that, and then we're gonna go ahead and start spraying. Probably gonna do 4 to 5 wet coats. Start light and then build it up a little, you know, medium wet. And final coat should be pretty slick. You don't want to spray it on too dry, because then you end up getting a rough texture, and we don't want that. So get it nice wet, make it look slick, and reduce the amount of sanding and polishing we have to do afterwards. This is the clear coat we're using. It's Body Proline 699, and then we have hardener, fast hardener. So this is what we're going to use. 4 to 5 coats with about 7 minutes in between each coat. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this 2-to-1 ratio. We're going to put it in the gun, test spray, and then we're going to go ahead and start laying down some clear coat. Got the gun. So I think this will be the first time I actually have any video footage spraying, because the rest of them keep getting messed up. So we have the door cracked a little bit for some ventilation. The fan is off because I don't want the ruining the spray pattern of the gun and getting any dust kicked up. Usually fill it about halfway to 3/4, because this opening at the top, I don't want it spilling out while I'm spraying. So let's give it a couple test hits and see how it sprays. I think it's good as is, so let's go ahead and start spraying. So here she is. First coat of clear. We're to go ahead and lay down our second coat of clear. And as you can see, this stuff is really shiny. Alright, second coat of the clear. Let's do this. I'm sweating. It says it's 90 degrees in here. I don't believe it though, but maybe outside. Let's go ahead and do this. Alright guys, we are finally done with the paint. We just laid down some heavy coats of clear. They are super wet. I tried to minimize any orange peel. So any areas that did have orange peel, I just went over again. This looks so good. This clear is insanely glossy. I know it's still wet right now, but when it dries, I hope it stays as glossy. But this looks so good. For an amateur painter, like someone who's never sprayed with an air gun before, this is really nice. I am happy.